Hi everyone, welcome back to Scrambled Eggs podcast, a podcast you'll hear only if you're lucky enough.
Updating you on adulting topics every Friday.
I'm Zoe.
I'm Kingsley.
So today it's the English podcast, which is the Scotch Egg podcast, which means we will be recording this podcast in English. So today's topic, instead of talking about world issues, we have decided to review a movie and analyze a movie.
Yes.
Everything, everywhere, all at once through the lens of Asian generational and family trauma. So first of all, let's congratulate the movie, the cast, directors on the success of this massive production, and they're sweeping the Oscars.
I was so worried that whether she would win Best Actress or not. I was like texting Zoe the night before the ceremony, and then I was like, I really wanted Michelle to win because it's just 1 week before Oscars. I watched this movie and I like immediately I fell in love with the whole plot and the meaning behind, and the cast, the acting, the editing is just phenomenal. And I'm so happy that they all won. Not all the awards, but like most of the awards.
Most of the awards.
Yeah.
I think it's also because we, as Asians, we know Michelle.
Yes.
Like as an actress for like a really, really long time. Like she was in Crazy Rich Asians and a lot more, I think, Hong Kong movies or Asian production movies. So we're kind of really rooting for her, although I haven't seen that movie yet when the Oscars aired or when the movie first came out. I think we have seen it in like being on posters in the front of the cinemas, and it was like massive during the time as well. But I just never had enough,
motivation,
attraction to the movie, or motivation to actually go and watch it. So
we chose Elvis Presley over Everything Everywhere All at Once.
I think because it's when we chose Elvis Presley, like the movie, I think it's because we know the name Elvis.
So it's
more.
like nothing can go wrong.
So it's like nothing can go wrong because it's like a life story of Elvis. Because when Remy was casted in Bohemian Rhapsody, and I watched that film, and it was really good. And it was about Queen. So I kind of had high hopes for Elvis as well. And also you get to listen to the music, which is like cherry on top.
Exactly. I also love the Queen documentary. So I also kind of expect the same thing. And then I think I know Elvis, this person, for a very long time, but then I didn't really know his personal life and his music, and I would just love to know why people are so in love with him. And I mean, that's still a good movie, but I wish I had the chance to watch Everything Everywhere All at Once in a cinema. I think that would be an entire different experience.
Yeah, weird, but good, maybe. Weird, definitely. So before I watched this movie, I have read reviews online, and also I've talked to Kingsley about the movie. He watched it before me. And the two adjectives I've heard of describing this movie was good and weird.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's kind of
spoiler alert, everyone.
Weird.
Okay, continue. I don't know how much we will spoil, but yeah.
Yeah, it's also weird because the word was confusing and confusingly good but weird.
Yes.
It's kind of like super weird for me as well, because usually these 2 or 3 words don't go in like the same sentence when you use it to describe a movie. So I was really on the fence about whether I should start watching this movie. So
and I think Zoe personally loves some really logical plot that makes sense. If something that goes wrong and feels weird, she would question the movie. So I was really surprised that Zoe loved the movie, and then she cried.
I think it's not like it makes sense to me, but I think it's because I relate to it a lot more because it talks a lot about Asian families. Like the protagonist is Evelyn, is an Asian woman who runs a laundromat with her husband, and then her father, which is called Gong Gong, and in the movie lives with her, and she has a daughter called Joy, who is a lesbian, I think.
Yes, she is.
Yeah. And it talks a lot about how Asian families work. Like, we see memes all the time about how parents won't say sorry to you. They'll just bring you fruits into your room as like an act of, peace. But yeah, a lot of these Asian family, like the ways we treat each other or the ways that we're brought up, I think the reason why I like this movie so much is because I relate to it quite a lot. There was this scene where Evelyn was telling Joy that she needs to eat better because she looks fat.
Yes.
Like, I relate to that a lot because, like, that's what my parents tell me. Like, I know they don't mean it in, like, a bad way, as in, like, body shaming or me or whatever. But I think it's just, like, a general thing that Asian parents do to their kids.
Yeah. It's just, like, forcing their opinions on the children. I think we, growing up in an Asian environment, we certainly have all these kind of experience, like, oh, if you're too thin, and they would say, oh, you're starving, just eat a lot, and they would give everything to you. Like, when you're at family dinner, they will hand over the dish in front of you, just have some meat or have some vegetables, eat more, and then they will just continue to give you something to eat. I think that works the same way as well.
Yeah. I think food is kind of like a symbol of love in Asian culture.
Oh, yeah.
Not just like Chinese, I think in Asian, like Asia generally. So let's talk a bit about our Asian background. So a bit about our family background. Is there anything particular about your family you want to share, or your relationship with them? Is it similar to the way that Evelyn and Joy have, or is it more chill? Like, is it Waymond, the way that Waymond and Joy has?
I think I grew up in a relatively traditional Chinese family. I think there are certain values that my parents believe in. Let's say you cannot have tattoos, you cannot have piercings. Like, as a man, you should act like that. Or they would teach me a lot about the Chinese tradition. But I respect that a lot because, I mean, growing up as a Chinese, cultural wise, I think I actually love the culture. I love the food. I love the festivals and everything. I think I'm proud of this culture. But obviously, there's something that we, like, my parents and I don't agree with each other, but it's not that we need to have a fight about it. I think my relationship with them was quite good. It's quite good. It's not was quite good. It's quite good.
My family, I think every family in the world has their problems, whether it's like a serious problem or it's just, teasing problems and fun problems. Well, I think sometimes me and my parents, we don't see things eye to eye. I think it's because sometimes I see things as a Gen Z, as in like my generation, and they see things as their generation, and their generation is a really different time than ours. And so sometimes we don't see things eye to eye. And I think Asian families, or maybe my family, we're not too good at expressing our thoughts. I've been raised to, try and guess what is on people's minds so I can act accordingly and not offend them. But most of the time, it's really hard to guess unless you're like Sherlock Holmes or something. It's really hard to guesstimate what people are thinking so you don't offend them. And I've been trained to do that since I was very young. So sometimes I just try to not offend people. But at the same time, when you do that as like a family, it's really hard to get close because you don't discuss anything. Because sometimes what you think others are thinking is not actually what they're thinking. So I sometimes, like, families, it's just hard to connect when you're guessing what's going on in each other's lives and not actually communicating things and trying to resolve things. About taboos, I think about dyeing hair or having tattoos as well, it's generally frowned upon in our culture, I think. People who dye their hair or have a tattoo will be seen as like unprofessional, or like reckless, or some kind of gangster. I don't think this is just necessarily an Asian thing. I think it's more a worldwide thing sometimes.
The other day I was talking to my colleague, and I told them that my parents wouldn't want me to dye my hair because they think it's such an unprofessional thing to do, especially I'm working in an architectural industry, and they think if you ever need to meet your client, meet your boss, they wouldn't want to see you in like a bleached hair, like auburn hair, any color, in any color. And then my colleagues were shocked because they think it's such a normal thing to do in their culture. So I wouldn't say it's a worldwide thing, except you're a pop star or you're like a movie star, you can dye your hair.
Yeah, that's true though. You see BTS
always
like has
all the
different
K-pop
colored
stars.
hair.
Yeah. And also when Zoe was talking about like how her parents treat her, like taught her to be like a certain kind of person, I feel like as children, we may have a different perception on how to be a good parent. From my parents' perspective, they're good parents doesn't mean what we believe in as a good parent. You know what I mean? Just like, I'm really thankful for everything that they've given to me because like they raised me. They when I was really young, I want to learn drawing, piano, and then if I need to do some extra tutorials, they will just let me do it. They take me to travel. They buy me clothes, like all these kind of things. I have really good food, and I think from their perspectives, this is how a good parent should be. Because in their generation, they don't have any material. They were living in a really crowded area. They were poor, and then now that they have the ability to give what they have to their children. So they think that's the best way to treat their children. And I do believe my parents were really proud. My mom once told me, "Oh, I think the luckiest thing that has ever happened to you is us being your parents." And I'm like, why? No. One of the luckiest things. But I, like, from my perspective, I'm really thankful for all these things. But at the same time, when I was growing up, I have a lot of things that I cannot tell them. Not that they won't listen, but they just don't care. Some kind of like mental issues, maybe like if I ever tell them I'm really sick of studying hard and like trying really hard because I really cannot do it. I really cannot get the number one spot in the class. And they would be like, it's just because you're not hardworking enough. Or maybe you're not as good as other children. Or maybe if I want to share them with my love life, I mean, I don't really have a love life, but like my love experience, they will not even listen because they're like, you're too young, you know nothing.
Yeah, my parents always say that.
Yeah, you're too young. Like, if I ever comment on someone not finding a partner in their life, they're gonna live alone. Like, maybe that's because there's one time I said something like, oh, because maybe that person, he just don't want to get married. He just want to spend his time on his own. And then my dad just shouted at me like, you don't know everything. You're just a child. Yeah. And I'm like, why? I mean, I may not know what he's thinking, that person's thinking, but I can make a guess as well because that's from my point of view. But I think that kind of creates the gap between us as children and parents.
Yeah, I think also when you were talking about your parents being proud of them being your parents is because they provide you needs like a roof over your head or food on the table or clothes, etc. I think it's also because they come from a generation where the quality of life
the post-war generation
was not that good. So those were the things that they maybe didn't have during their childhood, and that's why when they're parents, they want to give these to their children and kind of fulfill the needs of their children physically because they didn't have it back then. That was the core part of being a good parent. But whereas now our generation, we have that physical stability, we focus more on what we don't have now, which is sometimes, mental stability that our family doesn't give us. So I think it's like what we deem as good parents varies from generation to generation based on what that generation lacked when they were a child. So that's why it's like what we think actions of a good parent may not necessarily resonate with our parents. And also back in the days, the hierarchy in the family. I don't know if this happens in all families around the world, but in Asian families, usually you have to respect the older person and agree with what they're saying, even though it might not necessarily be correct, because they're older than you, they're senior, and you should respect them. And sometimes you cannot talk back to them even if they're wrong, and that's a very hierarchy thing back in the days generation as well. Whereas now, if we were to be parents, or this generation were to be parents, I think they encourage more open communication and want to invite the child to be part of the discussion of the family, whether rather than just making them agree or obey the parents' orders. I think that's also a way that would invite the child to confide in their parents more, that whenever they're experiencing something hard or sad, they'll choose to talk to their parents. Whereas maybe you and I, we choose to talk with our friends because we think they'll understand, and our parents would just say, oh, you're young, you know nothing, you're just not working hard enough. And in this, talking about all this kind of heavy stuff, I think it's a really good time to dive into what generational and family trauma is. So according to the internet, generational trauma is defined as trauma that isn't just experienced by one person. So it extends from one generation to the next. It can be silent, covert, and undefined, surfacing through nuances and inadvertently taught or implied throughout someone's life from an early age onward. And I think this is really really aligned with what we were saying just now about, what we lack, or sometimes, the trauma that is induced by previous generations because of what they lack in their childhood is kind of imprinted or induced on later generations.
There's a saying, what the parents cannot do, they will ask their children to do. I think this,
that's true.
This kind of mindset is always shown in drama or like movies, but I do feel like that kind of resonate with what we just discussed. They give me food, they give us shelter, they give us anything that we want, and then that's something that they don't have when they're young. Or maybe even they feel like, oh, I do spend time with you, but spending time with you doesn't mean you're getting to know this person better.
It's not quality time.
It's not quality time. I mean, I enjoy spending time with you. I enjoy going on travel with you, going on trips, and then talking to you. I mean, I do talk to my parents, but I also know that there's something that I cannot talk about. Not that I cannot talk about, but I wouldn't bring it up because they wouldn't understand, just like loneliness. I wouldn't tell them like how I felt during my entire high school life because they just don't understand. Because I don't think they experience that kind of thing when they were young. They're just like, oh, I need to have like a better job, better life. I need to earn money, that kind of thing.
I think another example of generational trauma that can possibly happen to a lot of Asian families is, I think a lot of parents believe that hitting a child or beating a child is the secret to disciplining a child. Like from a very long time ago, like maybe a lot of parents experience that and they think it's right, or maybe they experienced that and they became disciplined and they think it is a right way to treat a child in order to get them to be disciplined, and then that is actually repeating what is causing you trauma. So this is a really prime example of what generational trauma is. And it's like this vicious cycle repeating. Although it works, but does it necessarily mean that it is good or healthy for the next generation or for the family in general? Not really.
It's just like sometimes when we watch those Korean drama or whatever, they have this issue with the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. They're always fighting over the husbands and their sons' love. I think sometimes we must say, oh, that mother-in-law is just treating her daughter-in-law so bad. But honestly, this kind of mindset that stems from the mother-in-law's generation, like when the mother-in-law's mother-in-law, she's treating her really, really bad, and then she thinks that, oh, I can go through this phase with my.
Now she has to go through that as well.
Yeah, because that makes sense. That makes a good daughter-in-law. So this kind of generation trauma, it doesn't only limit to just you and your parents, but I think it also it also means something to the entire family. Maybe someday when you have a partner, how you deal with the relationship between your partner and your parents.
Yeah, and I think why we wanted to discuss this so much is because when we were watching the movie and we were seeing Evelyn saying how Joy's life is a mess and then criticizing Joy about everything she's doing and then thinking herself is already a really good mother because, she is allowing her daughter to become a lesbian or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is actually later on in the movie, it is actually kind of in Evelyn's memory or fragments of her past that shows that this is exactly what her father did to her. As in like saying her life is a mess, you're going to ruin her life, and basically never being proud of her no matter what path she chose.
Yeah.
And that's why, and also maybe this is also Evelyn doing this consciously or unconsciously to her daughter as well.
Yeah.
Because she thinks this is the normal thing. And that's why she's doing this to her daughter as well. And so that's why every time Joy sees Evelyn or is in the presence of her family, she just feels so much pain. And this is why this whole movie is happening, is because I think Joy's searching across all the universes to find a mother that would accept her for who she is and not trying to make her be better.
And also like finding the meaning of life. Like why do I need to live when life is so painful and when I cannot love the person I love, when you're not proud of me?
Yeah, and then I think after going through the multiverses, I think what is really important and what needs to be highlighted is Evelyn going up to her father and saying, it doesn't matter if you're not proud of me, I'm proud of myself. And by making this decision, she's actually actively choosing to break the cycle. So breaking the chain of the generational trauma by stopping it from passing on to, later generations, although some harm has already been done between her relationship and Joy's. And so, when we discuss the really bad relationship between Evelyn and Joy, do you think they have different points of view towards what happiness and life is? And that is why they kind of hate each other. I mean, Joy hates the presence of her mother so much. Is it just because it's a generation thing like we previously discussed, or is it more a personal point of view thing?
I think what we discussed just now kind of summarized the relationship. It's just like what the mother believes in is different from what the daughter believes in. The daughter wants the love from her mother for being proud of who she loves or who she is, but her mom just thinks that the best way to show that I love you is not to say that I love you.
Yeah. Is to constantly criticize you so you can be the better version of yourself.
Yeah. I mean, it stems from a really good idea because parents want their children to be better, not because they have the obligation or like duty to be a better person, because they just want their children to have a better life. It's just like maybe sometimes my parents, they would think that when you're living alone abroad, you must be living a really hard life. Why don't you just like come back and then I can take care of you, because they think that it is good for me. They can show me their love, but maybe they may not understand what I really want to do. It's not that I don't love them, but sometimes like other things that they don't believe in also matters to me.
So in a way, do you think that an Asian way to show love in families is by shaming or criticizing or not saying I love you?
I think it's quite
is it very stereotypical to say it's an Asian thing?
Yeah. But I would say this culture is quite toxic. Why don't you just say that you love that person when you have to shame them?
I don't know. I think also because, sometimes when you say something a lot, it just loses meaning.
Yeah, true.
Yeah,
True.
like it. Yeah, so sometimes I don't know. That's why it's kind of hard to get like a balance in the middle to not lose meaning, but also say it. Yeah, sometimes I feel like if you just say I love you, or I love you, it doesn't mean anything. Whereas if it's like a monumental moment, I think if you sit down and talk, like have a deep chat and you say I love you, that is so wholesome. That works and that connects each other to like the family members with each other. But if you do it more like an obligation or, you know, just like a chant thing, then it loses meaning.
Yeah, I think it's actually quite hard to be like, I'm not anyone's parent, but like for me, it's really difficult to be a good parent. I think there's no such a perfect parent in the world because we cannot fully understand what the next generation's thinking
and what the next generation's needs are, because when we become parents, although we want to give them the best mental support and try to make them, you know, not suffer mentally because we're mean to them or because we are harsh on them, but maybe they have different needs because we're just putting what we lack from our childhood and then providing them with that, but that may not necessarily be what they think you know, a good parent should be.
Yeah. So it's like, I think my parents also trained me to be a really self-disciplined person. Like I need to be obedient. I need to listen to orders, stuff like that. But I mean, I wouldn't mind them doing that because I also feel like, oh, maybe they're just doing good to me. I can handle that. But I've seen some of my friends when their parents trying to take control of their lives, they just went the other way around and they just completely lost control. And then I think it's quite sad because their parents are trying to be control freak. And for me, I feel like if I ever have a child, I would like to encourage them to do things that they like, but also taking care of them, not stepping into, like, not crossing their boundary too much. But I know that boundary is very fragile.
Yeah, talking about like privacy and being a good parent, do you think your child is like taboo or anything to be who they are completely in front of you, as in like their sexuality? Because in the movie, we see that Joy is lesbian and her mom, although knows that, she's not truly supportive, I think, of that. Whereas, I don't know, I don't think her dad has any comment on it. I don't think it was very
I think her dad is quite nice to Becky.
Yeah. So do you think your child should be freely expressive of who they are sexually in front of you, or do you think that's too much to handle? And what do you think your parents will think if you are of a sexual orientation or sexuality that they may not prefer or think you have, you know?
I think, first of all, it's communication, of course, because I think, yeah, maybe in our generation, sexuality is something that we may not bring it up with our parents. If you one day if you tell your parents you're gay or you're a lesbian or you're bisexual, pansexual, queer, they don't understand that. They because in their traditional belief, men and women should belong to each other, and then there's no such thing called homosexuality or like whatever, like pansexual anything. They don't have this mindset. So when you talk to them with topics like this, they wouldn't understand you because they don't have that kind of thing when they grow up. Not that they don't have, but they don't understand. They didn't have this mindset. So bring that concept to our generation when we become a parent. There will be certain things that we may not agree with our children as well. But I hope that, not that I guarantee I can be a good parent, but I hope that I would try to remember when I was young. I will also have this issue with my parents because they don't understand my generation. And obviously, I wouldn't fully understand. I would try to understand, or I would get to know them more. And then if they're happy to open to me, that's good. Because the way we treat our friends is different from how we treat our parents. And sometimes I don't think like treating our parents as the way we treat friends is the best way, because sometimes we need to have that distance between our parents and us.
Yeah, I get it. I think also because when we when we are at the age that we are now, I think we're so overwhelmed by like all these things we're encountering as adults, the world and everything, and we have a lot of thoughts on our minds, and the last thing we need is parents, criticizing our every move when we're totally new and being exposed to all these new elements in the world, and we're just trying our best to, show up every day, try to do what's right, try to be the best that we can be. But we sometimes like parents, like we previously talked about, they criticize you. Maybe in their eyes it's a way that they love you and they want you to be better, but when you're facing so many different thoughts and things at the same time, I think the thing you need most is support rather than criticism. That's why we would try to get kind of away for a while from them, to kind of get some space physically and mentally through our heads.
Yeah, I think like for us living abroad, it really gives me the space for us to reflect on all those years. Like, is something right to do to us, or how important are they to us? Like, I would definitely say my parents means a lot to me, because I mean I love them. Even we may not agree on certain things, but I still love them. Like, studying abroad made me realize how much I love them. But it doesn't mean that because I love them, I need to sacrifice my belief as well. It's just like, I don't need you to fully understand me, but at least when I tell you I believe in certain things, I hope you would support me.
Try.
Yeah. And I think that's also the case when someday maybe I'll be a father. I would like my children to be comfortable with me when they need to open up to me. Like when they need to talk about their values, their beliefs. They would come to me and tell me that what they've been suffering from and anything. I would like to listen to them. I just hope that I still have that kind and, caring heart to listen to all this, because we don't know. We change every day. So
I think a really good way to kind of wrap up all the things that we said today is that generational trauma and family trauma is still very real and existing in this world, and it might still continue to happen to us and to future generations, because what we think is good for our children from what we lacked from our childhood may not necessarily be what they need, and so the cycle goes on and on and on. But I think one thing that we can do is, when you realize something is wrong, don't continue to pass it on because it's, I experienced it. It's a generation thing. Break the cycle if it's wrong.
Exactly.
And try to do the right thing. And I think this movie is also trying to promote, open communication between family members, whether it's a fight, when they were in the car park or lashing out at each other. But, family at the end, they still want you in their lives. Like Evelyn said, like, life is maybe meaningless, but I would choose this moment every time, and I would choose to be with you. And I think at the end of the day, this is what family is about, because no matter what, they will always have your back. And I think all parents love their children. And even though we have discussed how maybe our parents have hurt us, or maybe we will hurt our children in the future, I think it's just because we see love and support differently than our parents, because we're from different generation. But I think ultimately all parents want to provide the best they can for their children.
Even if your parents disapprove you, or like you don't agree with them, or even, at some point, like in the worst scenario, they have totally traumatized you, and they're not open for communication. Don't let that that kind of emotion transferred to you, and then you got stuck in the rabbit hole, and it's just thinking that, oh, I'm not good enough. Sometimes we need to like pull ourselves out of the scenario and just think critically, like if it's real or not. If they disapprove you, are you that bad? Maybe no. Your friends will love you. You still have your value in the society. We all have a value. Even you think that you're a failure, or even your parents think that you're a failure, we still have our value in the society. So don't let one person or like someone that's so important to you to define who you are, but find yourself and believe in yourself, and try to communicate with these people, and then try to show them your love. And I think that will work out someday, but it is time. But just like what Zoe said, try.
Yeah. And I think overall, our review on this movie is really positive, although it's really weird.
Yes.
Super weird. My favorite part, has been discussed. The car park scene, Evelyn standing up to her father. But one of my favorite scenes is also the part where they were two pebbles. And it's like a scene that has absolutely no sound. There's only like subtitles of their dialogue, but it's quite powerful. I think it's the most philosophical part of the film, and I think it also is really cleverly carried out because there's no sound or anything.
Yes.
And it gives you a space to ponder on these thoughts.
Yeah. Like suddenly,
so it's actually really
cool. You just went silent. And then because, you know, if you watch the movie, it's like everything's going on.
Yeah, literally everything everywhere all at once.
Yeah, and then suddenly just goes silence, and then there's just like two pebbles talking to each other. It's like, what? What am I even watching? So if you haven't watched the movie, it's really worth to watch. So please go and support this movie. Yeah.
Yep, and that's the end of our podcast today.
Hope you like this podcast.
Realize we talk a lot about our trauma than discussing the movie's trauma, but okay, we're using humor to cover up our trauma.
Yeah, we all relate to the movie. Yeah, so the movie is just the starting point of everything. But yeah, we that's why it's a good movie, because we relate to it a lot.
Yeah,
I
think so.
Good.
I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you next week with another topic and, crazy discussions.
Yeah.
Okay, bye.